I'd rather die in a bomb than at the hands of a soldier. So, essentially, in our case, we'll be proving why conflict is, or what is the likely alternative of like these state militaries, and thus why we regret them, and why the alternative is essentially such that it makes conflict less likely, and then even when it does happen, it is lesser in scale and it is less damaging, particularly to civilians. So, beginning with what is the likely alternative of state militaries, right? So this is regrets motion. So if state militaries did not exist, what would the likely alternative be? Obviously, people will still want to defend, people will still want to invade. So what would they then do in order to achieve that? The likely alternative to state public militaries, right, is then privately owned companies providing military services, so mercenaries, right? We see this in the current world as well, but like they're not as widely used as like state militaries, right? But then in a world where state militaries would not exist, there would be mercenaries instead. People would pay the services, people would buy the services of these mercenaries. It is likely that these mercenary services would be kind of grouped according to like political alliance and kind of geographical location, right? Like obviously, if you come from one region, you're most likely to, I'll take you soon, don't worry, Anton. Obviously, you're most likely to kind of join a region that kind of aligns with your geographical kind of location and political beliefs most. So it's likely that there will kind of be blocks with it, right? Yeah, so that is the likely alternative to these like public state militaries, right? Yes. Why is this a good thing? Why does it make conflict less likely and less damaging even when it does happen? But before I go into that, I'd love to hear from you, Anton.
Oh, point, yeah.
Yeah.
So, if a state decides to enlist private mercenaries, would it be fair to call that a stealth state military? Do you grant that?
It is, because it is still a private military, yes. If the state is enlisting it, yes. If the state is buying the services of a private military, that is what we are proposing, yes, as the likely alternative. So, yes, beginning with why conflict is less likely and when it happens, it is less damaging. So firstly on why conflict is less likely. So let's look at some of the reasons that like conflict arises. Like desire for resources is one. All kinds of political tensions, like political rivalries between countries, right? And as well as kind of being dragged into conflicts and conflicts expanding, right? So why does having no state militaries and instead having kind of like privately owned militaries make that less likely? So firstly, one of the reasons that like conflict starts, especially kind of conflict that we see a lot of currently in the world, is like kind of bigger militarily strong countries doing military operations in smaller countries with relatively weaker militaries. This serves the purpose of testing this big state military, because once you have funneled a lot of like taxes into your own state military to build it up, such as the US, for instance, in order to justify this, you must essentially use this military and you must train this military in order to kind of like maintain like the position of a military superpower in the world, such as the US. You need experience for that, right? And you need to prove this experience by like sending this military that you've paid so much for into conflict, right? That is kind of symbolizes like your nation and your national pride. You send it into conflict so you can display to the world that you are victorious, you are mighty, you are powerful, and thus you strike fear into the other countries, right? So this gives you an incentive once you have paid for this like state-owned military. Once your own citizens are there, you have a national incentive to display your power, to practice violence, needless violence on smaller countries, particularly if they have resources that you want, you know, such as we've seen the US doing, George Bush doing 9/11 and whatnot. So essentially, if you don't have a state military, you have far less incentive to start these needless conflicts in order to display power, right? And then because it becomes more expensive to enlist military services, and the power of that will inevitably be smaller. Mercenaries, like it's a costly operation, and mercenaries, like you don't, because they're not conscripted and like according to the size of your nation, you don't have like millions and millions of men at your disposal unless you pay like so much money, right? But in order to do that, because you don't already have it standing there in your reserve, you'd need to justify it pretty strongly, right? So it may be more profitable to just take the diplomatic route in terms of like gaining resources or something. Whereas if you already have the military, you have all these no thanks. Yeah, you have much less incentive to hire those services, right? Those expensive services, and start a conflict compared to if you just had your military there, and you have less national incentive to do so and display your power that way, because it's not your military, it's a shared military. So you're not really displaying dominance, at least much less so than if than if it is your own military. Instead, you have other ways of displaying dominance, such as like being economically really strong and having a great functioning market, right? So this makes conflict less likely. And particularly, again, as mentioned, because it's not your own state military, and because you have to hire it, and because the soldiers are comprised not only of your own nationals, but of other nationals, like they don't have this, no, thank you, Anton. They don't have this animosity kind of making conflict even more likely. Like now what we see in a lot of like countries with tensions, you have like military personnel kind of at the borders, and they often come close to like shooting at each other. This happens between Finland and Russia. This happens between India and Pakistan. Just the fact of them being nationals and having these national tensions makes it so that conflict becomes more likely because there are close calls, and like you can't really trust average like military personnel like that to like not start a conflict, right? Like it's any day now, honestly. So conflict becomes less likely, right? Because of these mechanisms that I have given you. But why is it also less damaging even in the case that it does happen? So like one of the biggest casualties of war is civilians, right? When you have like what we have seen in the past decade, because of the rise of state militaries, are these huge scale military boots on ground operations. World War I, World War II was like a war of attrition, of machine gunning down hundreds of thousands of soldiers, right? And then what you see also, what the Nazis practiced is like kind of, what the Nazis practiced is like essentially spreading fear through like just destroying civilians, raping civilians, like taking villages, right? The thing about, and again, this is partly driven by like national animosity, right? Like if it's your own state military, you can feed propaganda to it much easier than if it's owned by a corporation. It becomes much more difficult because it's again owned by a corporation, and like there's many interests there, not just your military interests. So there's less animosity in the soldiers, making it less likely that the soldiers will practice this kind of propaganda, hate-driven violence and sexual crime, which we see a lot of now because it is state militaries. So there's less incentive for like violence like that. But also because you have access, my other speaker will expand on this, but because you have access to fewer soldiers, you'll want to use them wisely and have them focus on military targets, right? In order to actually powerfully conquer a country if you want to do that, right? Therefore, fewer civilian deaths. Philip will talk more about that. Thanks, Philip. Thank you, everyone.
Panel, Amanda wants to protect you from World War I. OO is going to protect you from experiencing the absolute nightmarish worst of World War I every single day of your damn life, right? 2 points of rebuttal before I start engaging in my case on what the actual alternative looks like, and it's not these wonderful organized companies, right? Firstly, about incentives to use the military. I think states have good incentives because they're able to make rational calculations because they are extremely powerful and extremely, layered organizations. This means it's not just the prime minister or the president that's like, aha, we'll nuke them. They have a lot of advisors. There's a lot of people working in this. There's a lot of people that study for this. But also, I think the military of a state seeks legitimacy the same way that the state seeks legitimacy in the international system, which means they have a significantly larger incentive to collaborate with other states, therefore seeking that actually getting the diplomacy that Amanda wants to push from your side of the house. I think the actual alternative is things like local militias. They won't be organized, they won't be private, able to be bought so much, purely because we will not have the kind of stable system that Amanda wants, that their case hinges on for these private organized militaries, right? 2 points of mechanization in my case and then an impact on militias. Firstly, the state power principle and how these militias actually arise. Secondly, on increasing global violence and instability. Finally, the impacts of the entire case. Firstly, on the state power principle, the way that states have originated throughout all of history is that people emerged in communities and gave up power to the state that then protected them. This means I consent every day in Denmark to not carrying a gun, to not carrying a rifle, to not keeping pepper spray in my pocket, and to not keeping a taser in my home. This is because I believe that the state is able to protect me in situations. On the police, I think the police and the military are largely intertwined, like they're trained together, but also I think this mechanism largely applies to international agreements as well. I also want to be protected as people in Ukraine want to be protected from the invasion of Russia, etc. Right? At the point that there is no military then, The state is not keeping you safe. It is principally not fulfilling its duty, which means I just as a person don't have an incentive to continue engaging in the state. This means I don't have an incentive to continue doing things like not carrying a rifle, not carrying pepper spray. This is because the state cannot protect you and it's failing its duty, it inherently loses legitimacy insofar as, regardless of things like democracy and autocracy, the thing that people have always first and foremost wanted guaranteed is their safety. Because I don't care whether I have the right to vote if my children are out there dying in the streets, because the first and foremost thing I want is to understand that I can sleep at night. Without this, you're going to have significant fear and instability in the population. Insofar as everybody's told us that weapons, etc., probably still exist, this means then that the organizational capabilities of these militias exist to an extent. I largely don't think they exist at the point that Amanda wants them to exist for these well-organized private companies, specifically because there is no state to guarantee the emergence of these private companies in a peaceful way initially. This means that these militias become hinged on fear, the desire to protect, the fear of other people, the way that human evolution has been working. Because I am afraid. Because every day that I go out and there are men in the streets in my extremely safe country and I'm walking alone at night, I'm already afraid. Now take that up a notch. I know that there's nobody there to save me. I know that there's nobody there to help me. This means that I have an incentive to do things like take up arms, to do things like carry pepper spray and tasers in my pocket. At the point that the state doesn't have legitimacy, I don't have to abide by its laws, so I can turn to my nature, and at the point that the state cannot protect me, I'm going to protect myself. This means that the state has already failed its principle by not having a militia. This already gives us an impact, but notably, this also tells you why militias develop in such a violent and ugly way. Because now suddenly they were based on human biases and not layered organization. They were based on things like ethnicity and ideology, notably the things driving the militias right now in places like Sudan, in places like DRC, in places like Myanmar. People want to protect their own because I trust other women implicitly because I see myself in them. This means also I'm probably likely to trust people more on the basis of their race and their ethnicity and things like the ideology they're trying to promote. Notably, these militias become grouped based on these common interests that are not organized and not rational. Two impacts on global violence and instability. Firstly, at the point that any civilian starts picking up a gun, any untrained civilian starts picking up a gun, there is a huge increase in accidents on their side of the house. I want to note the most deaths related to gun violence in the United States are children accidentally shooting guns at their parents and themselves. Apologies for the graphic imagery, but that is the truth. It is the fact that people aren't able to put these things away. They want them quickly at hand, right? This means accidents will start increasing. Already there is civilian death. But also, I think there is an incentive to do violence because suddenly it becomes an option. Because I'm driven on fear, I'm driven on the idea that I want to protect my ideology or my ethnicity, and nobody else is doing this for me. This means it's a possibility then that when someone approaches me, I have a gun in my pocket, I have the capacity. It means that then I'm acting on my own human fear, and I'm significantly more likely to use this. I'm significantly more likely to do this, even if that person is innocent, even if I haven't had time to engage in diplomacy and understand the rational calculation. Before I continue, I'll say closing.
So you talked about how, on comparative, the states have very good information and organizational structure. Do you think they work with perfect information?
No, I don't think so, but I just think that I have to prove to you that militias work with worse information, right? What are these militias going to be wanting? Three things. I think this is going to be like securing the kind of resources for growth and economics. It's going to be securing safety and promoting an ideology. Notably, I think safety is at the core of the human incentive because it's the first thing you think about when you wake up and when you go to sleep because you cannot sleep if you are not safe. Three impacts on militias. Firstly, destruction on communities. Comparatively, the state is significantly more beholden to its citizens because it gathers legitimacy from them not engaging in violence. It means it's time to do things like protect indigenous people and protect people of different ethnicities and different ideologies. But comparatively, militias don't have the same thing because they're based on specific ideology or race. Secondly, no international laws. We do things like declare wars in the international system. The UN and etc. is setting the rules of the game, and states have an incentive to garner for legitimacy there. I don't see why these militias would have any incentive to engage in this kind of diplomacy when the US is not able to enforce these rules via things like peacekeepers. And finally, the spread of weaponry to the population. There is a desire to recruit because now you understand that every day that you are not winning against other militias is a day that you are unsafe. This leads to less organization, spillover to innocence. We get innocent death and a spread of violence on the government side, and I am so proud to oppose this motion.
Woo! I don't even know should I engage with the OO here because they're completely out of debate. When you're out on the street in Denmark, military doesn't protect you, it's the police. Nobody said that you cannot have police. I really don't know what you're talking about. I see like, I got them or something. No, it's really like you will still have police and you will still have local protection provided everywhere. But yeah, and even if police doesn't exist, state will hire someone. If it's not state commanded, it will be hired by, they will hire a PMC that will protect you even in your best case scenario. Okay, some of the things you said, like you said, weapons will spread to civilian population. I mean, first, nothing exists because of this burden is just not filled, but okay, well, weapons spread to civilian population. You know what, when there was a war in Balkans, everybody got 3 guns in their home, even though they were all professional militaries fighting on every side, even American military and peacekeepers and everyone. To your second, how do these spread? Well, you know, when soldiers leave the area, they leave the guns. When they come to area, they bring the guns. Civilians sometimes can kill the soldiers and take the guns. So yeah, weapons can still end up in hands of civilians. Second point is you said there will be no international control mechanism. This is simply not true. If you have PMCs, then it means that countries can make a common budget and control the situation in the world by buying the PMCs and paying them from this common budget to stop the wars around the world. Why? Because wars are not in interest of the wars are not good if they're not in interest of your country. You want to stop them because you want to stop the destruction. You don't want immigrants from Africa or wherever coming to your country destroying the job market. I'm sorry, but I mean it's true. Like you don't want to have these huge national and humanistic crises. So there will be some international governing bodies formed to control this. Okay. Now they said states are rational. States are not rational, guys, and states are not running rational wars. So first, every state has its interests and corruption. Sometimes they have interests that they trade with other countries, like I will do this for you, like in European Union, and there is a lot of corruption. For example, in status quo, huge weapon manufacturers can pay your country to start a war. Like it's not rational. I will take a quick PI. Go.
If I see that my military is being so extremely corrupt, then I won't have any faith in it. To that point, there wouldn't be any military. We wouldn't be having this debate. Please engage.
Okay. I really didn't understand this. But second thing, so states are not rational. They run on interest and corruption. Second thing, they're nationalistic and religious biases. So these parliaments, these countries are run by people who are nationalistic, who have religious biases. Why in most of the world people are still tied to this, their ethnicity, and yeah, so they're likely to start wars based on just these reasons. Because they hate people from other religion, because they have done something bad to their grandparents 100 years ago. Third thing, populism and trying to incite violence. It always happens, you know, they say, oh, you need to create a common enemy that exists for the people. And that's why they will sometimes, a lot of times start wars that are not rational or even not function rationally. They have infinite money coming from taxes and they have a monopoly over violence. So you cannot even say anything. Oh, no, state is using my tax. Well, unless you create a revolution, brother, they're going to use that money however the fuck they want. I will give you a good intuition pump. Putin has lost 200,000 men in Ukraine. For what? Like these resources that he's going to get are not worth it. Not worth it at several million of smartest people leaving the country, etc. Like it's really not rational. And that. Okay. Let's go further. So I explained why they're not rational, while police still exist, why they are going to protect you, and why the weapons will spread anyways. So bye. Okay, let's go. Okay, so I will now need to explain. I will now introduce our new argument that PMCs are more efficient, meaning that less money will be spent on military. First, while they will be more efficient, there will be competition. Well, you have price, you have market. You can choose PMCs that are giving you the best money for your value. Second thing, they are just getting a job done. So their mission is to fight a war, and they just want to do it. They don't want to spend time on stupid bureaucracy, on these stupid things. They're just there to get things done. They don't need so many personnel. Third thing, there is no political corruption in these PMCs, so you cannot be set as a leader of a PMC just because you're close to someone in the government. What does this mean? The PMCs must find people who are the best for the job, like a CEO. You need to find a CEO who is the best for your company. Please stop with these loud PIs. Who are the best for your company. You need to find someone who can operate it the most efficiently. Fourth, while they will be more efficient, is because you have long-term track record of them, likely. Like when they appear, you do not have it, but during time they cooperate with some countries, and you can see what they're doing. This is why also PMCs will have a long-term incentive to have a long-term cooperation with the country and not turn its back on it. Because if a PMC turns their back, I'm just preempting any attacks. If a PMC tries to turn its back on a state that's financing it, they will not get any more deals in the world anymore, because nobody will want to cooperate with such a PMC who can turn their back, who can betray them. Okay, what does this mean? This means that less money in the government will be spent on these militaries. And what are the alternatives? Well, alternatives are that you can spend this money on education, on social benefits, or for hospitals. Why are you going to spend it? Because it's state money. State spends money on military and these things. So there is no choice what we're going to do. And we don't need to prove that this will be, they will be so much more efficient, etc. Just 1%. 1% efficiency means billions and billions and billions of world GDP used in a good way, used for schools, for hospitals. That means thousands of new hospitals, thousands of new people treated, and less of these militaries. And we can assume that some states will abuse this power, but the rich states will abuse the power of PMCs. So what? Rich states today abuse the power of their own militaries. What is the problem? Today, you have incentives to join a military, which are patriotism and tradition. So my grandpa fought in the war. I want to fight in the war for this military, to spill blood for this country. These PMCs, on the other hand, they don't have that. They just have it. Well, I'm just going there to do my job. I need to do the job most efficiently in the most well way. I have a finite pool of men that I can recruit. I don't have 150 million Russians who are indoctrinated since their beginning, or Ukrainians or Serbs or whatever, that I can use to fight the war. I have only these people who need to earn money to get the job done, and who are the best to get their job. So, thank you.
I think that OG made a strategical mistake that Laura has taught me many, many times happen. That is when you don't pick the right counterfactual. We gave you specifically 8 reasons to why militias are likely to happen. Alyssa really likely proves this to us. But even so, I'll interact with them and tell you why our case still stands and why it's the winning case, okay? Even if the private military is the reason why they're is the likely alternative, then our things still stand because they don't know who to protect. They are unloyal, panel. They do not care. They just care about who's giving them the best and biggest profits. They do not give a fuck about how I am feeling when I'm dying in Ukraine, because the Ukrainian war has drained so much money that they no longer have the ability to pay these private militias. I think that they try to rebut this or preempt this by saying, well, the state is financing the military or the private military. Well, panel, then I'm afraid to tell you, then that is the state military. Please note that they're going against their own case. Okay, then. Secondly, our case still stands because war is expensive. People know that war is expensive, and I, as an individual, feel that the state cannot fund these private militaries when I know war is expensive. I feel that they can no longer be giving me this sense of security, and therefore I am likely to go out and buy a gun. They, on their side of the house, prove no tipping point to why, firstly, I'm not likely to use the gun. Secondly, to why having the gun is bad in the first place. Panel, I'll tell you this. We uniquely prove a tipping point here, and that is, I will feel really, really bad. I'm going out and buying pepper spray. When a weird dude from Netto followed me all the way home, I wanted to go and buy pepper spray, but I could not do that because it's illegal in Denmark. Because I know this, I know I'll be protected, right? Secondly, then, they're likely to use that gun whenever they feel unsafe because they don't feel that their state is protecting them. They don't have this sense of security. When me and Alyssa walked home from Laura's hostel yesterday, I felt safe. I knew that I could be safe because I'm in a country that has good military, good police. Secondly, then, they try to tell you like, oh, the military and police aren't interactive. Panel, when I lose my bike and I'm actually going to need help, the Danish police, who is like one of the best in the world, Scandinavia has great police, cannot find my bike. When I steal something accidentally, trust the police all of a sudden knows. But the police is only efficient to the extent in which it doesn't really make you feel safe when you have like these private militaries. I don't think they prove a tipping point. I think they're being assertive, and I think militias are the right chance or the right choice or whatever. Okay, then. Insensitive, there we go. I can't say the word, it doesn't matter, you know what I mean. I don't think that these private militaries have any incentive to actually be going in and protecting the local fair. I am a Danish person. I'm on the Danish WSDC team. I feel proud in representing my country when I stand here, when I stand at Worlds. I feel proud. That is the same thing that keeps militaries going, panel. People feel proud. People feel a sense of like priority to be actually fighting these war battles, which is also why I think their stance on like these are people who will be acquired and people are likely to stay employed here simply doesn't stand. Thirdly, then, and why I think the unique tipping point here, they try to tell me that like there will be less nationalism, and I as a Pakistani person can tell you one thing. As a Pakistani person who's also Afghan, but that doesn't really matter in this debate, my granddad still gets mad when I tell him about my Indian friends. It is so deeply inlined in us that we are not able to work together. This is what is likely to happen. A Ukrainian person feels mad at a Russian person because to a certain extent, no thank you, to a certain extent, they feel that the country's reliability and responsibility is pushed upon them. I will not be able to stand in war and look at an Indian person and be like, you have my back, you got my back, because at the end I know that they're pushing people out of India because of like Kashmir, who's been in war for a long time. No thank you. Okay then, before I move on, I'll take closing if there is a POI. Opening?
Okay, so they tell you the police will not exist. We tell you on our side there is no nationalist and revanchists who are going to commit war crimes, like in my region that they committed war crimes because they hate each other based on ethnicity. These militaries don't have people who have ethnic cleanse them.
Okay, I think that to a certain extent your ethnicity is always a part of your identity. I don't think they prove a point in which why these private militaries push their identity away to the extent in which they want to almost die for a country in which they don't even stand behind, panel. I don't think they prove this. Okay then, what else do we get out of Amanda's speech? I actually think we get a couple of good things, right? They give us this whole thing about like private militaries, also just to deal with the police part. I think I've dealt with it pretty thoroughly, but just to make sure you got this, panel, please note, you no longer feel safe. It doesn't matter how big or small the police is. You don't feel safe because the state isn't protecting you. The state isn't there to guarantee your safety. When I'm not guaranteed my safety, we go into like a social contract. We give them something. We give them agency to perform and do whatever they need to do in order for me to feel safe. Okay then. On these things of like militaries do horrible things, I think there are a couple parts of this that are true. I do think that to a certain extent, militaries do horrible things, but what I also think they do is they show solidarity, and I think this is the extreme point in which we have to remember. They show solidarity to people who they agree with. Yeah, Afghanistan, like the US came to Afghanistan and kind of ruined the country, but they showed support. They did it in a good way. Right now, Ukraine would not be able to stand had it not been for the solidarity of people, and I think we really need to remember this. Israel would not be able to fight the war they have in Palestine had it not been for the US military. They are showing solidarity to their partners, to their alliances. I think what we specifically tell you here is these militias are much greater, and a real example of why I think they're likely to be the alternative is if you look at Myanmar. They regretted their state military. They went, nah, fuck you guys. Now they have militias who are going up against each other every single day, specifically based on ethnicity, and they have tried to hire like another country's military, but funny enough, it hasn't worked. They're still in war. They're still going through civil war, which is why I don't think they're stand. Okay then, so to do some certain weighing, I think we can do this by illustrating an example. When we have one person in our household or like in our society who feels unsafe and has a gun in their house, is to the point in which the state has failed. They have failed to the extent in which now a child probably has access to the gun. Secondly, a person is likely to fire that gun. If you look at people in the US, why do they have so many school shootings? Because having guns is normalized. If you look at Europe, people feel safe. People feel a sense of security. Time, please stop. People feel a sense of security. They no longer want to be going out and getting guns, go in and get pepper spray. I don't think people are likely to feel this sense, which is likely why we firstly weigh on like scope. A lot more people are affected if even one person feels a larger sense of distrust, because then they go and start their own militia. Then they go and start like local neighborhood that goes and kills people. I don't know, large example, but like goes and give people's parking tickets, right? Secondly, then I think we largely outweigh them on like firstly severity. Our case is much more severe. When a person is damaged on our side of the house, it's much larger. We have the impacts of a failing democracy, a failing state. They give us what a private military that's not even really private at its fullest. Secondly, then I think
In this debate, Closing Government will be running an extension where we will be focusing on what we think is by far the most important impact of this debate. What will happen to the nuclear weapons? What do nuclear weapons look like under our side? Why are they basically non-existent on our side? Why is that by far the most important thing? And comparing to the opening half of this debate where we can't really see like exactly how mercenaries are great, we're going to actually extend on that a little bit and say why these mercenaries aren't just vastly lower in scale than state militaries and their impacts, but most importantly, why nukes are actually what we should care about. But first, a bit of direct rebuttal, right? Okay, so we hear a bit about the state and like what's its position in society now, and they're like, no one's going to care about it from OO. We hear that, and that's going to like hamper it a lot. But this isn't like necessarily true. Like my grocery store doesn't defend me. I still care a lot about the service it provides. I still want it to be good. The state serves other purposes. It's probably still going to take in like manage a lot of cooperation at a high level, like some sort of organization. We think this is important. We think people will care about it. They're still going to engage democratically. They still want the best people making those good decisions, whatever they are, right? So they talk about how like, the UN gets its power from its peacekeepers. We think this is very funny. The UN has no military power. Peacekeepers are often a joke. Why is this the case? Because peacekeepers are nothing compared to state militaries, right? Democracy is secondary in the international stage because fundamentally we all know that military is what defines that power. If you remove those state militaries, you not only empower within the state that actually, guys, democracy and like coming to a conclusion together is going to be the way this is going to work, but on the international stage, even more so, hey, we need to get together in a room. The UN might actually get something done for once. That would be extremely good on our side. Okay, and they talk about how militaries are like prideful and how this is somehow good. Great. You're proud to kill like the other. We're proud to defend a fundamentally arbitrary border. These are great things to be proud about. We don't hear from them like meaningfully why this is like good. No, thank you. Okay, so to get into our main point about nuclear weapons, we need to talk a bit about what these mercenary groups actually look like, right? So what we're here to do is we're here to significantly improve on the prisoner's dilemma, right? We see that countries that build military forces, they force others to do the same. It leads to an arms race, a significant increase in all potential to kill, right? Like if you don't do that, you as a rational agent, if someone else doesn't do that, then you should rationally invade them if you have a stronger military, right? And so in theory, right, there should never be any wars because everyone builds up like massive militaries, but that's also not the case because like there's information asymmetry, you get something wrong and a war still happens. It's like the absolute worst case scenario. Instead, and so we have this idea of complete destruction and you have to be all or nothing in your military expenditure, right? So instead we have these mercenary groups. What do they look like? They're here to quantify the risk, right? They may have many clients, like it could be state actors, we kind of agree, it's going to be more complex than that. You might have some companies that hire specific mercenaries or so on. They might have overlap in these clients. You might hire a couple Merc organizations. Mercs may have clients that overlap with each other. No, thank you. What does this mean? This means that like it's a far more complex system, but by far the best is to still not have a fight, right? We see that these mercenary companies are going to be used in a defensive manner, or even better described as police forces, right? The state itself is a huge box, and it has strict borders, one military. The prisoner's dilemma is like very, very real. Mercs are a company, right? You might change provider if they're not very good. They will be used defensively. Right, sure, we can imagine, no thank you, that sometimes they're used for bad things, right? They could be used for some corporate espionage sort of stuff. It could be some rich person who has a really, really bad grudge and they use it to murder someone. We could see that happening. But we don't think this is very likely. Instead, they're more going to function like insurance companies, right? They're there to sort of say, hey, which package would you like? You can pay us this amount of money. We'll give you basically a police service, right? That's how we see it going to be working. And what is like the best outcome for these merc companies? What do they want? They actually don't want to fight. The best thing for them is they sit on their ass and do nothing. They're going to have like informal agreements with each other to sit around and do nothing, or just provide basic police forces for people who commit sort of crimes. That's what we see as the by far the most likely scenario, and this leads to a vastly different scale. Yeah, sure.
What is the difference between a state military and a state standing army?
Yeah. So I don't think that matters in this debate. Like what we see as the main difference here is that you will have some like companies that are serving as military corporations, but what makes them not state militaries is that they're shared across like lots of areas. There's overlap between what companies you might have and who they serve and so on, right? As I've talked about extensively in my speech. Okay, let's get into the most important thing, nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons will still be developed, right? The technology is still going to happen or whatever, but nuclear weapons require vast investment of resources, and they're not actually very effective if you want to like do something, unless you want to blow up like a vast amount of people. They're super ineffectual. So a mercenary company is never going to use them, right? I mean, they're going to be at worst asked to do small scale incursions. Nuclear weapons are far too expensive and just way too inefficient to do anything important. No, thank you. So we see that there's not even going to be a use of them. But even if there was a small use, like it's never going to be apocalyptic. Like to build all the submarines you need, all the nuclear missiles you need, all of the planes you need to have like an apocalyptic level of nuclear weapon usage is just only possible with a vast state military. And this just does not exist under our side of the house. Why is this by far the most important thing in the debate, right? We see that the nuclear war looms over us like in the modern day and age significantly. And we all do like to ignore it. Like we pretend it isn't like a significant risk, but it genuinely is, right? If a particular kind of disagreement gets particularly hot, and then a small mistake can cause a vast disaster. We came incredibly close to such a mistake multiple times. So even if you can believe in like mutually assured destruction or whatever, it still can be the case that we end up all dead very, very soon. By eliminating not just like the willingness to use these weapons, but their fundamental like existence at an apocalyptic level, you just don't have to have this risk. And this is by far the most significant risk in this debate. We sort of see like if you are a person who is like kind of racist or really stupid, and you want to hire a mercenary company to do something bad to someone else, like under their side of the house or in the status quo, you're still doing lots of bad things to people. You're finding other ways to cause harm. We think that's a wash. Whereas on our side, we solve the nuclear problem. And for that reason, we win this debate. Very proud to propose. Thank you.
Other side, state wouldn't exist. And this is really bad. So at first, OO explained really well, like why state require the coercive method. So nobody wants to share their possession. So human is also greedy. So like we have, like if we want to create a state, we have to force like paying tax or follow the law. Then if we would like to do that, we need like monopoly, and also we would like we need like third of force. So they already explained. So then here, impact is like historically we can't form the first state like in the other side. So there are no subsequent state. So there are stateless society. So what the stateless society looks like? There are no civilization. Why is this? Because if we want to achieve civilization, we require we have to start from gathering material, gathering resources, and then in this step we require like monopoly system and also like threat of force. These two things only these things can do like starting gathering material and resources, and it requires the state. So in anarchy, not now, there are no solidarity, no incentive to support each other. This is my possession. This is mine. They don't want to give you. Human is really greedy. They are self-centered. So we need coercive method here. So we can create a state, and then this is the only way to achieve civilization. And civilization is why important. First, for economic development. So if we want to do invention, we require economic development. Like for example, like we need like for invention, we need people who invent. So we need good academic system, school, like teaching system. So like to make this school or teaching system, we have to gather money and then we have to distribute properly. And also, and also like people want require like invent like people who want to invent require money resource to invent like machine or laboratory. And also like only state can gather and distribute these money to these people who want to invent. And now and also it's really important economic development for like specialization. So in anarchy there are no specialization because specialization require gathering resources and distribute properly. So in other side they can't. And specialization is really good because first it's like simply effective, and second, due to this efficiency, like cost of price goes down. So it means more people are likely to access the material. So in the other side, so the other side continues farming society because no invention, no specialization. So first, we can't enjoy like smartphone, we can't enjoy laptop. It's so inconvenient. So quality of life would be lower. And second, we more people are suffered from disease because we can't expect any medical development. People are likely to die so soon. Okay, I'll take a POI.
States existed long before state militaries existed. And even if this is the case, if states produce these large-scale destructive wars every 50 years, then we welcome a return to monkey, okay? But more likely, we're going to see like small-scale targeted military operations in our world, and we prefer this.
Okay, I'll explain more impact here, and and not only economic development, but also civilization is really good for people for vulnerable people. Why is this? Because in the other side, like stateless society, there are no incentive to help poor people. I mean, yeah, some people might kind, but there are no capacity to do. Like if we want to help vulnerable people, we require like money and resources like, collectively. I will talk later. But in our side, like state can provide these like social welfare. Why is this? Because like social welfare means like for example like infrastructure like road or like electricity. Then if we want to achieve this infrastructure, we have to gather money and like resources and collect properly. And also like the state can provide access to poor access to electricity or something in poor area which you can't earn money. I mean, the field where you can't expect a big benefit, nobody wants to invest that. So only the state or company who are forced to do by the state can do this. So like in our side, we can help more like vulnerable people. So it's really good. And also, military itself is also really powerful to make a good state society. For example, like in the history, a lot of infrastructure made by military. And also, so their role is not only fight or defend, but also their really strong power to make a good society. And also, like for example, when the disaster happened, who helped the disaster victims? On the other side, nobody want to go to the dangerous area, or like some might want to do, like some might kind, but still they have no capacity because they have no money to make these helicopters or something, or like there's no money to make a shelter or something. But in our side, military have capacity to do, and also military have experienced a lot of practice, so they have a strong power and they are really helpful for these people. So for this reason, I am very proud to oppose.
Nuclear submarines are called the handmaidens of apocalypse. These are machines that are hidden deep within the sea. They're virtually undetectable, and they're ready to rain down literally hundreds and thousands of missiles on almost every nation on the earth, spreading irradiation all over and have great willingness to enforce mutually assured destruction. We on the side of closing government say that this is not a world where you feel safe or where you are safe. We say that if the evolution of nation states and their standing armies leads us to the point where this nuclear apocalypse is possible and not unlikely, that's the point where the states have failed and they are not keeping us safe and they are not serving us well. Two points to summarize. Firstly, I want to talk about civilian safety. And secondly, I want to talk about the purpose of state and the nuclear apocalypse. So before that, a little bit of framing. 2 points of framing Thomas has brought you. Firstly, state militaries, the really important thing with them is that they provide the ability of unprecedented, unimaginable scale up of military power, right? That plays out in 2 ways. Firstly, vastly more amount of weapons, so there's just like more of them because of economies of scale and then types of incentives that Thomas talked about. But secondly, and much more frighteningly, the unbelievable scale up in innovation, right? We have developed these horrible weapons that are threatening to erase humanity and erase all life on Earth through, irradiation that will only disappear after 100 years. No. We think that having standing armies locked in this horrifying prisoner's dilemma where you operate with imperfect information is exactly the state of world that we deeply regret. And of course, the opposition can say that, well, mutually assured destruction has brought less conflicts and so on. Well, we say due to the set of incentives that Thomas has talked about, peacekeeping treaties run out. Peacekeeping treaties fail. It does not take much in order for countries to start raining missiles on each other. All it takes is one accident, really, and we have avoided some of them already. Before I continue to the summary points, I just want to paint the alternative of the world where we are successful and what do we prefer. So, I think in the alternative world, the incentives are set such that the corporations are more localized, but they are less able to scale up innovation and the amount of stockpiles of nuke that we have. Also, we think that the states are better able to disincentivize such scaling up and such innovation, and that's where we stop the worst outcomes on our side. So just imagine, today, literally all of the societies in the world reject cannibalism. Cannibalism is a really French belief. So what we regret is what we imagine in the counterfactual is a world where ideas of nuclear innovation and army innovation and horrifying scaling up is as shunned as cannibalism in today. Right? But can we do this? Is this even plausible? Well, we think that there is a chance. Firstly, we think that in terms of having military treaties, we have been able to do this partially with things such as banning of chemical weapons, right? Even during the worst horrors of Second World War, chemical weapons weren't used at large scale. We were able in 1960s to agree, USA and Russia agreed, to no longer do nuclear tests in space. So far that's a success story for the opposition. But what's the problem? The problem is the set of incentives that Thomas talked about, where these treaties run out and lead to eventual reversal, and we get back to matching the other stockpile, continuing experiments, trying to build up a better military capability due to prisoners' dilemma and standing armies. So we think on the alternative, well, we are more rural society, and we don't have smartphones and medicine like CEO talks about. And we even might have a state that opening opposition talks about when it comes. It's going to be a little bit like South Sudan. That is preferable for fairly obvious reasons. Okay, when it comes to civilian safety, opening opposition gives 3 broad points. Firstly, contractors are going to be based on ideology. Secondly, they have no incentive to engage in diplomacy. Thirdly, spread of weaponry in civilians. So firstly, for ideology, the state has much more incentive to push out propaganda in order to militarize folks so that they will join the army. Opening government tells you that states have incentive to create more conflicts. We tell you on Closing Government that they have more incentive to create propaganda and breed nationalism and otherization and so on. Secondly, when it comes to diplomacy, we think that these companies are like private businesses. There might be more like, and they are less struck by this nationalistic propaganda. They will be able to make deals. This is kind of a wash. Thirdly, spread of weaponry among civilian population. In many countries, this is already status quo. This is already status quo, and it's like not that bad compared to our alternatives. So then, all right. So impacts on our side. When we don't have standing armies and when we don't have state militaries, there's much less incentive and ability to build huge nuclear stockpiles and awful weapons. You are not able to do a Manhattan Project when you're like a private military contractor. And why we think that we win this debate. So over opening opposition, we take it because any state that allows this state of affairs has failed. You do not feel more safe. You are not safe if you can die. Like literally, when you are irradiated, your extremities become gray and fall off. It's invisible. There's nowhere to run. This is like really scary, and it's a possibility. We are also willing to accept their worst case because that is preferable to nuclear holocaust. Over opening government, we take it because we make more people safe, make them feel more safe, and the degree of safety is better. Over closing opposition, we take it because it's fine. We can be without smartphones. We can be like rural middle-aged society. Some humanity is better than no humanity. Thank you.
For the first time so far, panel in plural. I am in my speech going to bring you the primary thing that we should be thinking about, the grand impact of like, what happens if we have no society? What happens if we have no states? What happens if we have no militaries? In my speech, I will bring you one, like rebuttal and comparisons of the teams, and two, what we bring to this case. What do we bring? We bring you the primary impact of anarchy, which is to say, the historical perspective. When we're talking about the regrets motion, we got to identify the moment that this converges from the current timeline. And that is not even in the Middle Ages as we talk about. No, we're going back way further, right? The existence of states, the very emergence of them, is the moment that state militaries start being used. So this is the big thing that I say differs from the opening opposition. God bless them. They talk about the current impact of living in like Somalia and Sudan, which is terrible. But you know what's even worse? Living as a caveman, living in sustenance agriculture, living on a farm where you die from a simple infection. Why is it the case that we don't get the emergence of societies in the first place? Well, the thing that would take us down would be if we include like private military companies or levies in the definition of like, not in the definition of state militaries. But let me point out that it very much so is. One, what is a state? It is a polity that controls a region or a territory. Two, what is a military? A military is a collection of armed forces that is used for the purposes of a state. Is a private military used for the purposes of the state? Yes. Is it armed? Yes. Is it an armed force? Well, what is a force? A collection of people. Is it a collection of people? Yes, it is. Therefore, a private military company, the moment it becomes employed by a state, is a part of the state military. If you have a collection of volunteers, a collection of people being paid privately to encourage themselves to join, that would be in the definition of what a state military is. And since they don't really bother to define this, I say you go by my definition. So, why is this something that is important? This is important because the impacts of, for example, the opening government, where they talk about like, oh, we'll still have police forces, don't really happen because we don't really have a government to fund a police force in the first place, now do we? Governments started doing police forces in the like 1800s when we started to eventually get enough surplus resources to even fund like polices who don't fight wars on the side as well. Before that, we had militaries that would do the job of the police for them. And this we don't have. And before that, we even had state militaries that would be like funded on an ad hoc basis from time to time in the form of peasant levies. What they need to define is like, why is it better on their side where only companies fund these things, where only local localities, where cities, but not civilizations and states fund these militaries, and they don't do this, and they can't do this because there is a common action problem. These would never want to take the burden of like funding these things. There was a word somewhere about like, oh, I like my local grocery store, but would you sacrifice your life for your local grocery store? I don't think so, right? And the company will not sacrifice all their profits in order to defend against piracy because like sea lanes. No, some other company will deal with that stuff. It's not happening. Let's see what they have to say about this. Go. Yes.
If France can like enlist the services of a company and then stops enlisting the services and the company keeps existing, it's not France's own state company. It's a company whose services France has bought.
Okay.
Will exist, states will have interests and they will hire the services and then stop hiring them, and the company is not a state entity.
Sure, so like the private military company is not a state military. The private military company becomes a part of the state military for the duration of whenever they are enlisted. And when they stop being enlisted, they stop being a part of the state military. For that reason, we include that in the definition. And let me also point out that like during, like in the ancient times where you used to do this, you wouldn't even use private military companies. You wouldn't even use mercenaries. You would use like forced conscription of peasants in order to create peasant levies as militaries. That would be included in our definition. Why is this important? This is important because like this means that the impacts are way stronger than what is talked about in the opening opposition. God bless them again. Like we're talking about living in a Bronze Age society, and we're talking about living in a world in which like one, when you are born, there's a more or less like 80% chance that you will die before the age of 5 because like there's a significant chance that you will get an infection and you will die because there's no penicillin. There's a significant chance that your mother will die because she gets, again, no penicillin. There's a significant chance that there's a single bad harvest and you all starve and die. And even if you survive, you live in brutal hell where you have to live through like constant suffering of having to worry about starving, about dying, about freezing to death without the protection of a state to help you. Of course, this means we also get no nuclear weapons, which is the primary, impact that the closing brings. Let's see what they have to say about it.
Yeah, Anton, you're over dramatizing this. Like, wouldn't it be nice to like go back and touch the grass?
There's grass outside. Okay, we can go and get it. No, thank you. I'm good. So let me point out, like, importantly, like, sure, we don't get the nuclear weapons, but like, in this world in which we don't have the development of states due to the lack of ability to enforce the rule of law, we instead have a world in which people live in constant sustenance agriculture in perpetuity. You are locking people into hell forever until you get an extinction event where like a meteorite hit the earth and you get the same impacts as a nuclear weapon blowing up everyone. I'd say it's way better to have the current society where like maybe everyone dies in bliss because we stop having children. Way better as like the end of society as we know it. So like, what do we have? Okay, I actually have time for one more. Sure, go ahead.
We can present
Give me
the
a
most likely case. Like, what the fuck is this? We give you a bit less inflation, bit less war crimes, bit more money. Like, our impacts are milder, but they're really realistic in this delulu debate.
Oh, but ours are the most realistic because we actually bring you the logical chain. Like, as long as you don't have an ability to enforce the existence of laws, you don't get the creation of states, you cannot protect yourself against revolution, against civil wars, against even bandits coming across the border trying to invade you, and you don't get, like, even the semblance of a state to go away with. You don't like, get the situation of Somalia where you get a gun to protect yourself with. You don't even have guns. You're trying to grow wheat to survive the winter. That is a way stronger impact than anything else that has been brought into this debate. No innovation due to a lack of specialization because everyone was living with like no resources, which means you need a grand scale to be able to even gather enough wheat to hire one scientist to be able to like test different things to maybe conjure up some gold or whatever, and maybe they invent a wheel or something that can make agriculture a bit more productive, and then like 2,000 years, 10,000 years down the road, you get some more inventions, and then you get some more, and then you get some more, and eventually you invent a gun, and then maybe you get some like wars here and there, but you still get the modern wonders of medicine. And I'd say I'd be way happier to maybe die when I'm 50 in a nuclear holocaust compared to dying when I'm 7 because I starved to death during a bad winter. For that reason, I am proud to oppose.
Alright, awesome. Then we've made it to the results of the Open Grand Final of Stockholm Open 2025. We had a wonderful debate. And I was lucky for once at this competition to not be judging it alone. So thank you to my wonderful panel, Andrew, Adrian, Benjamin, and there you are, and Arena. You guys were lovely. It was a really wonderful discussion. We also had 4 amazing teams. We have congratulated quite a lot. So we can, when we celebrate the winners afterwards, we can just celebrate all of you in that applause. Initially, we had some differing decisions.
We had a long deliberations where we talked about all four teams. All four teams were carefully considered. We did, in the end, reach a unanimous decision that the winners of Stockholm Open 2025 are from the team in opening government.
This one is for all the Finnish people, not for not my ancestors.
Exactly.
Hell yeah.